There's a moment almost every parent in the West has lived through. You're in a supermarket or a restaurant or the backseat of a car, and your child is falling apart over something that, in hindsight, will seem almost comically small. A broken cracker, a wrong-colored cup, the wrong turn on the way home. You feel the eyes of strangers. You feel the heat rising in your own chest. And somewhere in that moment, a thought sneaks in that you don't say out loud. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. Now picture something else. A Korean household, dinner table, a 2-year-old sitting through an entire meal without a single outburst. No bribery. No screen shoved into tiny hands to buy silence. No raised voice. Just calm. The kind of calm that looks almost unnatural to Western eyes because we've been trained to expect chaos as the default setting of childhood. Here's the uncomfortable question underneath all of this. What if that calm isn't about better discipline at all? What if it's not about stricter rules, sterner voices, or more consistent punishment? What if it's about something almost nobody talks about, something so quiet, so invisible, that most parents walk right past it every single day? That's where this goes. Not into another list of parenting hacks. Not into another 5 tips to stop tantrums video that leaves you feeling more exhausted than before you watched it. This is about something underneath all of that. Something that might explain not just why Korean kids often seem calmer, but why the entire Western framework of discipline, reward, punishment, timeout, repeat, quietly fails so many families who are doing everything right and still ending up drained. Let's start with the myth, because it has to go first. Most of us grew up believing that good behavior is the product of consequences. Do something wrong, get punished. Do something right, get rewarded. It feels logical. It feels fair. It's also, according to a growing body of research on child development, almost completely backwards when it comes to actually building internal self-control. Punishment teaches something, yes, but it teaches fear of getting caught, not the ability to self-regulate. A child sent to timeout learns that expressing big emotions in front of a parent leads to isolation. They don't necessarily learn what to do with the emotion itself. They just learn to hide it better next time. But this is where things get strange, because Korean parenting, at least in its more traditional form, doesn't rely heavily on punishment at all. And yet the behavioral outcomes, at least on the surface, often look more controlled. So, what's replacing the discipline? There's a word in Korean that doesn't have a clean English translation. It's called nunchi. Loosely, it means the ability to read the emotional temperature of a room, to sense, almost instinctively, what others are feeling before a single word is spoken. And children in many Korean households are trained, from an extremely young age, to develop this skill. Not through lectures. Not through worksheets on emotional intelligence. Through pure, constant exposure to how adults around them regulate their own emotional states. Here's the part most people never realize. Children don't primarily learn behavior through instruction. They learn it through nervous system contagion. If a parent stays calm during conflict, the child's body, not just their mind, starts to associate conflict with calm. If a parent escalates, yells, overexplains, or panics, the child's nervous system absorbs that pattern instead, regardless of what the actual words being said are. So when a Korean parent responds to a meltdown with quiet, near-silent composure, they're not just being patient. They're transmitting a physiological signal. This moment is survivable. This moment does not require alarm. And over time, through thousands of repeated micro-moments, the child's own baseline shifts. Not because they were told to calm down, but because they were shown again and again what calm actually looks like in their own body. At first, this seems like a simple parenting tip, stay calm around your kids, but it's actually revealing something much bigger. Something about how discipline in many Western households often functions less like guidance and more like emotional overflow. We explain too much, too early in moments when a child's brain isn't even capable of processing logic. We reason with a nervous system that's mid-meltdown, essentially trying to negotiate with a smoke alarm while the house is still on fire. But there's a second layer here, and it's even less obvious. In many Korean families, a child's behavior isn't seen purely as an individual issue. It's tied to something called gibbon, the collective emotional atmosphere of the household, and something deeper still called jong, a kind of relational bond that ties family members together almost like an invisible thread. When a child acts out, it's not just their problem to fix. It disturbs the gibbon of the whole space, which means the correction that follows isn't purely about punishing the individual, it's about restoring harmony to the group. This changes the entire psychological contract of discipline. In an individualist framework, a child misbehaving is a personal failure, theirs or, by extension, the parents'. In a more collectivist framework, misbehavior is treated as a disturbance to a shared emotional space, something everyone quietly participates in repairing. The child isn't singled out as broken. They're gently pulled back into rhythm with everyone else. And here's why that matters more than it seems. Shame and isolation, the emotional core of most punishment-based discipline, actually increase dysregulation. A child who feels like an outsider to the family unit doesn't calm down faster. They just learn to perform calm while their internal world stays chaotic. Whereas a child who is subtly, wordlessly folded back into the group's emotional rhythm has a felt sense of belonging that punishment can never replicate. It's tempting at this point to romanticize the whole thing. To turn this into another, the West is broken, the East has it figured out narrative. But that would be dishonest and it would ignore something important. This works, but only if it doesn't tip into suppression. There's a well-documented shadow side to collectivist emotional regulation, and Korean society itself has spent the last 2 decades wrestling with it. When staying calm to preserve harmony becomes never express difficult emotions because it disrupts the group, something breaks, quietly, invisibly, often for years before it becomes visible. Studies on emotional suppression among Korean adolescents have linked overly rigid gibbon preservation to increased anxiety, internalized stress, and a reluctance to seek help even when genuinely struggling. Calm, in other words, is not the same thing as okay. A child who never has a visible meltdown isn't necessarily a child who has processed their emotions. Sometimes they're simply a child who has learned that emotions aren't welcome. Most people misunderstand this because they see the surface behavior, the calm dinner table, the quiet child, and assume the internal experience must match. It doesn't always. Which means the goal here was never to copy a culture wholesale, like installing a new operating system onto a completely different context. The goal is to notice the principle underneath the method, separate from its risks. And the principle is this. Children don't primarily learn regulation from being told what to do. They learn it from what they're shown, moment to moment, in the emotional tone of the people around them. Discipline, at its root, isn't a system of consequences. It's an ongoing transmission of nervous system states, repeated so many times a day that most parents never even notice they're doing it. That reframes the whole question, doesn't it? It's not really how do I get my child to behave better. It's what am I unconsciously modeling, second by second, in the moments when my child is falling apart. Because that, far more than any punishment or reward, is what's actually shaping them. There's something quietly humbling in that. It means the work isn't really about the child at all, at least not directly. It's about the adult's own relationship with their own nervous system, their own tolerance for discomfort, their own ability to stay steady when everything in them wants to react. No parenting tradition has this fully figured out, not the Korean model, not the Western one, not any single framework you'll find packaged neatly into a video or a book. Every culture reveals something true, and every culture has a blind spot attached to that same truth. What seems to hold up, across all of them, is something much simpler and much harder. Children need to feel emotionally mirrored, not managed. Seen, not corrected. Studied, not silenced. Maybe that's the actual shift. Not stricter rules. Not softer rules. Just a quieter presence, one that doesn't need the child to be calm right away, because it's not trying to control the moment. It's trying to be the moment's floor. If this video helped you see parenting, or maybe even your own childhood a little differently, you can subscribe for more videos like this one.